final resume review for tonight. They're basically saying I'm part of the 100 Devs curriculum, and I'm just looking for general critique and advice. And they mentioned like lack of education and out of tech experience. So one thing that I noticed on this is it's very closely following the format that the 100 Devs folks gives people to follow, which is this format here. If it loads, come on, Bob Coder. So this example resume that they gave is almost this exact resume here. The problem with that is that if other people from 100 Devs use that same format for their resume, your resume doesn't stand out. Your resume looks like everybody else. And so you have to find a way to sort of stand out and sort of grab their attention in a way that's like, oh, cool, look what this person can do. Again, from that perspective of, I want you to come to my company and do that for my company too. So as much as possible, you want to try to, you want to stand out. You want to make your resume look a little bit different. I think it's good as a template to get started, but I think that this is too close to this original template that they, sorry, over here. I think it's too close to matching this template that if other students from 100 Devs are using that same template, all of your resumes are going to look the same. Even though you're going to have different projects, the layout looks too identical to everybody else that it's going to get kind of lost in the mix. So let's take a look at this. So calling themselves a software engineer, again, using a little bit of color on here is fine. They've got an email address. It looks like they've got like a portfolio site. They've got their GitHub link. They've got LinkedIn on here. And then they've got an @ name, which is Twitter. I would be careful about putting a Twitter profile on a resume. If you tweet regularly about technology, then it's okay to have. But if I click on this and all I see are cat memes and political statements, it's actually going to hurt your chances. So be careful about putting social media on a resume. Now I want to go click it just to see. I also want to kind of click on their GitHub and see like how active they are on GitHub. So if we go look at their Twitter, they've got small Twitter following, which is fine. I happen to also follow them. They got retweets from the other 100 Devs. But as I'm scrolling here so far, all I'm seeing are retweets other than, you know, hey, if you missed this, like go through this thing. So that's fine. But mostly what I'm seeing are retweets of other people's tweets. And so this doesn't really help. This doesn't help this person as far as like being a technology thought leader or something like that here. So I would probably remove the Twitter account from the resume. Now on their GitHub, they've customized it. I love that they've got this portfolio. They've taken some time to like customize this. I think that that's great. I love seeing some of these charts and stats. They've got some pin stuff, and look at that wall of green. This tells me that they're doing this like every day. But one contribution every day almost makes me think that they've got some kind of bot setup that's just doing a commit and pushing into the repo. Like, what is that one contribution that they make every single day? Code Wars. Okay. So if that's the case, then great. They're doing Code Wars every single day and they're pushing a single commit because they're doing Code Wars every day. That's fine. But if it's like, you know, added something to a README or added something to a private repo, that would make me think that you're probably got some sort of automated thing going on to have like 7 days a week green. As a hiring manager, though, this also worries me a little bit that you don't take a break. Like, when's your downtime? Like, you gotta have a bit of downtime and like clear your brain. So I would recommend like, don't code really hard all day, every day. It's important to hustle, yes, but it's also important that you kind of take a break from things too. So again, if we zoom out and we kind of take a look, me personally, I'm kind of iffy on the 2-column format. Having your contact info and your skills block here. The skills block isn't very expressive as far as the amount of technology that you know, which is okay. If you know these technologies really, really well, then it's okay to list fewer things. But I wonder whether you actually dabbled in more technologies than you actually list here. but we'll get into some of these other things. I would probably want to see a little bit more space in between like lines of text and the heading, because this all kind of like blurs together. Like you've got more white space in between your work experience, like in between these jobs here, than you do between your work experience and your volunteer work. And same thing with your summary and your work experience. I would probably change up the blank space usage here a little bit more. All right, let's zoom in and take a look at this. So again, if you're going to put a summary on a resume, you got to show me high relevance in a hurry, why you're important to my job, and cool, you can come do that here. So you're creative, you're detail oriented, you're a software engineer with a background in hospitality and customer service. Okay. Proven track record of creating and implementing successful front-end web applications. Okay, cool. You can come do that here. Looking to bring my skills. No, you're already asking me for something. You don't want to put an ask on a resume. You don't want to ask anybody for something on a resume. So I'm looking to bring my skills to a tech company with global reach. No. If my company is not a tech company with global reach, then I'm going to read that and go, nope, we don't do that. And I'm going to pass on your resume. Again, when I'm looking at these resumes, I'm looking for a reason to say no. So what you want to do is you want to tailor this for the company where you're applying, and you want to sort of sell them on how you're going to have an impact at their specific company or in their specific industry, and not make these generic statements like this on a resume, because it doesn't stand out. In fact, if I'm just a small startup and I don't have global reach, I'm going to look at that and go, that's your dream, that's your aspiration. We're not global. So even if I hire you, if you do find a job where somebody has global reach, are we going to lose you as an employee? It would be like saying here, like, I have an aspiration to be a mobile game developer someday, and I'm an insurance company. We don't do mobile games. So I'm going to pass on your resume because we're not aligned here. So you have to be careful making statements like this. And this is also something that I call putting an ask on a resume. You don't want to ask for something. Caprino asked in chat, what's your opinion about the contributions section? Was that on this resume or the previous one? Give me a little more context on that. Do companies pay attention to it? On my profile, on the contribution on GitHub. Yeah, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Some companies will look at it, some companies won't. I would look at it as a hiring manager just to kind of see, like, what kinds of projects are you involved in? Like, what kinds of projects have you done? What programming languages do you use? Does that line up with what you got on the resume? Because again, I'm going to look at this whole thing around, like, how relevant are you to the job that I'm seeing your application for? Like in my profile, I have a private repo for a project I'm creating for like 3 or 4 months. And in public, it shows empty. So in GitHub, you can say that you still want to show the contributions on private repos, and then they don't see what the repo name is called, but they will see the green dots for what you contribute. So that's a setting in GitHub that you can actually enable to say you want to be able to show contributions to private repos, and it won't show anything about it. It'll show how many contributions, but it won't show what the repo is, and they won't be able to see anything about the commits. But I would absolutely turn that on, because you don't want to have like a blank wall on GitHub. Like when we looked at this person's GitHub, it was like blank wall and then suddenly wall of green, because that's when they started development. I've seen a lot of GitHub profiles the exact opposite, where they go through a code school, and so it's like code. And then when they graduate, they stop coding, and then there's just nothing after that. Or there might be like the occasional green dot because they're like, I'm trying to find a job, I'm doing take-home assignments, I'm interviewing, or I'm like, resting, recouping, whatever. But then it's mostly empty after that. So as a hiring manager, I would look at that and go, how are you keeping your skills sharp if you're not coding? But does it mean you have to code all day, every day? No. It would be nice to see some amount of contribution, that you're still working on projects, you're still maybe maintaining old projects and things like that. So we can talk about that a little bit more after the resume review if you like. Cool. So they're a software engineer at 100 devs, January 2021 to present. January 2021. So you've been doing this for almost 2 full years. I didn't think 100 devs was around that long. I thought it was started in 2022. If someone in chat can correct me on that, but to say that you're part of 100 devs for 2 years, that's great if that's true. But I didn't think 100 devs was even around for 2 years. It should be 2022, so definitely double check that. Otherwise, it looks like, wow, you've been doing this for 2 years, which is great. I'm going to expect that you know this stuff really well if you've got 2 years of experience doing this. So you got to be careful with that. Recent projects, again, I would want to see a little bit more about this. So you made an application to help people plan events and parties. That's fine. Website for a local noodle bar. Yum. Photography portfolio. Okay, but like, how did you build these? What did you learn from it? What was the impact of building this thing? If it's just the project for, this is something that we got assigned at 100 devs, and that's fine. If it was a client project that you got paid for, you need to tell me that. Like, tell me that you got paid for this project versus this was just something that I did that I didn't get paid for. I think that differentiates like professional experience versus just project experience, is whether you got paid for doing that project. Because working on a project that you don't get paid for is not really work experience. It is project experience. You're still building experience. But from a professional experience point of view, me personally, just my opinion, it's kind of a hot take, I don't consider it professional experience if you didn't get paid for it. If it's volunteer, it can be different. But if it's just like, yeah, I just worked on this project because it was a part of an assignment, then if you didn't get paid for it, then that's not really professional experience. You still learn some things, but it's not the same as like getting paid for doing it. Because when you get paid, you're going to put a lot more effort and work into it, hopefully, than if you don't get paid for something. 100 Dev started in 2020, 100 Dev started in 2021. So lots of different things. So if this person actually started in 2021, that's fine, but they've only got 4 projects to show. Plus looking at their GitHub, it doesn't look like they started back in January 2021. It looked like they started in June of 2022 if I go back and look at their GitHub profile. So again, it doesn't line up. Like if you were really at 100 devs that long, even starting in January, like you have no Git contributions at all until May. Then you have a contribution. So that's where like 2021, no commits. 2020, 1 commit in July. But in 2022, like they didn't really start coding until May, or at least committing to GitHub until May. Now, again, if this stuff is sitting in a private repo, you need to go in and you need to enable showing commits in private repos. It won't show the name of the repo like it does down here. It won't show this information. It'll just say contributed, to a private repo or something like that. But I think it's important to enable that if you've got stuff in a private repo, because it'll show like regular sort of work. So this doesn't line up to me. As a hiring manager, if I did look at their GitHub graph and look at their portfolio and see, okay, well, all these portfolio projects were done within this range of time, that doesn't line up with what they say on the resume. That throws everything else on the resume into suspicion, and I'm more likely to just say no. Again, I've only got a few seconds to kind of go through this. So as a hiring manager, it might look good at face value. I might get you on a phone call and say, cool, you've been at this code thing for 2 years? And you're like, no, it's actually only been a year. It's like, oh, well, what else is a mistake on this page? Like, you're going to start throwing a lot of suspicion on things. So you got to make sure everything on here is accurate. So again, just something for this person to be aware of, for sure on this. As a hiring manager, would you be concerned if a candidate did only commits and no code reviews? Not if they're entry level. If they're entry level, I probably wouldn't expect a lot in the way of code reviews. If they've done some, great. But that would be an expectation that I would want to see more on like an intermediate level and upward, where they're actively participating in code reviews and pull requests and things of that nature. But if you're an entry level dev, just committing into your own repo, whether you even do branching or doing pull requests, that wouldn't be my expectation. If you do, great. But my expectation is that you can just commit code, even if you just put it into your main branch and just kind of carry on with your day, that's fine. Like, that's my expectation, is that you have some idea about how to use Git. It doesn't have to be super deep experience. So tell me a little bit more about these projects. So again, going back to the resume sample, if you do bang resume sample in chat, you'll get a link to this Google Doc. And these are just like little snippets of things that you can feel free to borrow the layout. But when I see a project, this is what I like to see as far as a project layout. Give me the name of the project. Was it a solo group project? Can you give me a link to where this thing lives online that I can go experience it, or link to the GitHub that I can link immediately to that thing. Again, on a resume though, you want to promote the projects that are most relevant to me and my company. So if you've got lots of projects, then you want to show me like the 3 or 4 that are most relevant to me. And so building a big resume with all your skills, all your projects, all your jobs, save that as a big resume. When you go to apply for a job, make a copy of it, trim out everything I don't care about, bring it back down to 1 page. Only leave the relevant skills that I care about. Only leave the relevant projects that I'm going to care about. Tell me about the jobs that you had and the bullet points that I'm going to care about. Where when I read that, I'm like, cool, come do that here. That's going to get me on the phone. That's what's going to grab my attention and have me want to call you. But if you just give me a resume of like, here's everything I've done ever, it's like, well, now I've got to hunt and search for the kinds of things that are relevant to me. And if you're giving me work to do when I've only got 10 seconds to skim this thing, you're going to go on the no pile. You got to stand out. You got to show me something that's going to make you stand out. So tell me a little bit more about the project. Tell me about the impact of building this thing. Like you built a website for a local noodle bar. Is that actually in production somewhere? Are they actually using this? How many people hit that website? How many people actually use this thing? That would be important to see. How many photos? How are you doing the photo uploads? Are you putting them on S3? Like, how are you managing the images here? How many things are in the portfolio? Like, I don't even have a link to go look at this. Now, if I do click through to their GitHub, I do see these kinds of things. It's like, okay, well, there's your noodle project, and that website's actually pretty flippin' nice. But I had to do several clicks to get here. But when I look at this, it's like, cool, did you do the photography or did you just do the layout? I mean, the layout's fantastic. Love the color scheme. You know, it's loading in the images. I can't click on any of these to see anything, so I don't know what it is, but you've got the contact info on here, kind of. I mean, it looks like a very generic kind of thing. So is this a real client or is this just like, this is a potential website? Like none of these are links. Well, the reservations is, it's a link, but it doesn't go to anything. So this is what? Like what kind of project is this? It wasn't for a client. So again, being able to differentiate, like this was just a project that I built. Like this is an example, you know, e-commerce, like menu type of website that I know how to build. But to put it on here and go, oh yeah, I built this photography portfolio. I mean, in this case for themselves, but like Jen's Noodle Bar, like, is that actually a place? Or is this just an example project that you built because you're trying to attract, like, in the case of 100 devs, they're trying to do their 100 hours project and they're trying to attract clients so that they can actually get some paid work. If it's just an example portfolio project, great, but tell me that. Because when I go look at it and go, oh, you made something for an actual restaurant, but then I go and I look at it and there's nothing there, then okay, you can do HTML layout, but you can't actually build an interactive site. So it kind of lowers the impact of, oh cool, look at what you did. When I actually start looking at it, it's like, meh. It's nice. The layout of it is fantastic. I love the colors and I love the layout, but it doesn't actually do anything. So if that's not the intention, if you do actually mean to build it up as a workable website, then say it's in progress or something. Or say like this is just an example like template that I could use for another type of similar restaurant or something like that, I think would give a little more information to the person reading your resume. Led a team of servers. Great. Effectively execute private dining events upwards of 500K across all venues. Fantastic. That's a great quantifiable kind of bit of information. Coordinated front of house staff for seamless guest experience. Okay. Ran training program for new hires. How many? Tell me how many. Over how long of time? So 2014 to present. So you've been there for a while. You've been there for 8 years. How many people have you trained? I would love to see that. Facilitated, make sure you capitalize the F on that. Facilitated communication between restaurant staff and corporate events sales. You kind of talk about that here. So what exactly did you facilitate? Also, try not to let a bullet point wrap to where you're only got a single word on a line by itself. In visual design, we call that an orphan. And I would either make this bullet point not grammatically correct, or I would actually, even better, pull these bullet points back out here to the left margin and that sales word may like pop up on the previous line. But try really hard not to let bullet points wrap. The other thing that you could do would be to reduce the line spacing, because this looks like 1.5 line space on this stuff. Just make everything like single line space, and maybe don't do a 2-column layout. Put your contact info up here in the corner, and then put your skills block under your summary if you really want to keep that summary, and then the work experience for 100 devs. But again, give me more about these projects. Maybe you could downplay a little bit of this, but that's up to you. Freelance work from January 2021 to present. Again, they're kind of hanging on that January 2021, so maybe they were part of that original 100 devs cohort. So they actually made a portfolio for somebody else's travel website, which is fine, but this is more recent than your server job. And this is more relevant as technical experience than your job as the private dining captain at Big Night Entertainment Group. I would actually move that freelance work up here. In fact, I would actually put it above 100 devs, because 100 devs is kind of like where you're learning this stuff, but this is actually like freelance work. In my mind, when I read this, like, oh, you got paid by a client to go build this thing. I would absolutely make that the first thing that you list as your work experience, because that's actually professional work experience that you're getting paid to do. 100 devs, you're not getting paid necessarily to do 100 devs work unless you actually get that client work. Volunteer stuff, it's good to have on a resume if it's relevant to the company. If it's not relevant to the company, you can take it off. In this case, they're volunteering for an animal shelter and they're working on, again, web development stuff. So it's volunteer, it's something that you're working on live. Is that project experience? Is it professional experience? This is where, if you're actually doing this for a volunteer organization and this is live somewhere, I would consider this professional experience. I would actually put it under your freelance work and just put volunteer or voluntary or something next to it. But I would absolutely list that as part of your freelance work and put that up at the very top. But yeah, you're doing it on a volunteer basis, but you're doing it as part of your freelance work. I think it lends more credibility into, oh yeah, I'm also doing this as part of my freelance. Now, if you started at 100 devs back in January 2021, and you've been doing all of this work also since January 2021, my hope is that if I go look up Little Trails Animal Shelter in Boston, Massachusetts, and I find their website, it's going to be pretty freaking awesome if you've been working on it for 2 years. So again, you have to be careful about these timelines that you're putting on the resume. Like, have you actually been building this website for 2 years? Have you actually been building this photography travel website for 2 years? Because my expectation is going to be very different than what we saw in your GitHub profile, where most of your Git work has been only the last, 4 or 5 months? Well, since May. So May, June, July, August, September, October. Let's call it 5.5 months. That's what you've been committing to GitHub. So if these projects have really only been built in the last 5.5 months, these timelines are very wrong. But also my expectation is going to be very different. If you said, I've been working on this portfolio site since May, I've been working on this one also since May, it's like, okay, you've been at it for about 5 months. I'm going to have a very different expectation of the experience than seeing on here that you've been doing this for 2 years. So I would be really careful that you're not misrepresenting yourself by putting these really long timelines on here. I'm wondering how much of that is actually from this Bob Coder. No, Bob Coder is actually 2020, 2019, and so on. So maybe those are the dates, but I would double check those dates and be honest about this. Like, have you really been working on this for 2 years? If so, give me a link to the website where I can see it. But I'm going to have a pretty high expectation if you've been doing this development for 2 years. So something to think about there. Let's go wrap that one up, and we'll go hang out in